Hey everyone, welcome to Pride Life Presents, another podcast episode from Pride Life magazine. And I'm really excited for our next guest. And this is actually going to be our second episode. So, yeah, join us. And we've got a great interview ahead of you. I'm going to do a little bit of an intro, though, this time around, before I actually give the name of this fabulous woman. So, before we go into it, look, she's laughing her head off there, blimey, look. But it's true. Oh, I never said your name then. Hang on, let me carry on. So, this woman, after spending a large part of her life questioning her identity, she realised that she had to allow her true, authentic self to live and come out as trans. And since then, she has not stopped striving to improve the lives of others, working with the LGBTQ plus community and organisations, standing up for trans rights seemingly in every aspect of her world. Amongst the many roles she is responsible for, she is a global LGBTQ plus advocate for Interpride Global, a Stonewall Schools role model, an independent advisor and hate crime ambassador to Sussex Police, and she is an independent custody visitor, checking on the welfare of detainees, particularly those who belong to the transgender community. Her work has seen her being highly influential on many people's lives. And in fact, in 2021, she received an OBE for her services to transgender equality. It is an absolute honour to have her on our show today. So please welcome Joanne Monck OBE. Joanne, welcome.
Yeah, hi, thank you so much for that. I'm starting to blush now. It's incredible. No, thank you. That's really nice.
We really appreciate your time, and I'm so excited to chat with you because, even as your intro says, there's so much that you do, to work towards, LGBTQ plus inclusion, but obviously your focus as well is around trans inclusion, really important there.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. And it's a passion. It's an absolute passion. I have a daytime job, but I'm just involved in so much advisory groups. You mentioned Stonewall. I should actually correct you on that because Stonewall aren't doing school role model visits anymore. They've stopped them. I class myself as an independent schools role model.
Yes, well, that's good. That's a shame that they're not doing that anymore. But previously having that title, but continuing that good work is really important.
Yeah. Oh, definitely, yes.
Always absolutely working in schools, and educating actually not just students and pupils, but also staff and teachers, because it gives them more.
Yes. Yeah, it makes a huge difference. The kids are our future, so,
Absolutely. So listen, right, a lot to get through. And I want to talk before we kind of start touching on a lot of those areas that you're already working in, thinking about, your journey, to kind of where you are now. So can you tell us a little bit about your story? I know it had many kind of twists and turns, to get you to present day, shall we say?
Do you want me to start from the beginning?
It's up to an hour podcast, so we'll go with what we can.
Right. Well, I can keep it reasonably brief. I suppose the seed of Joanne was planted in David's body before he was born. David was my previous name. That was back in 1955. At the time of David's birth, an imaginary tree was planted. So if you sort of picture a tree, it was planted, and over the years this tree would grow, and its trunk and its branches would form David's characteristics, his personality, his strengths, but the roots were never his. They always belonged to Joanne, and those roots would feed David with her thoughts, her emotions, and her desires, until he released her from almost the prison that she was incarcerated in.
Yeah.
David knew something was different. When he was about 5, his mother had a dressing up box. He used to love putting on the clothes that she'd left out. And whilst he didn't understand what was going on with him, because let's face it, back in 1955, early 1960s, the word transgender probably wasn't even in the dictionary. And there was no way he could go to his parents and say, look, I want to be a girl. It just wouldn't have happened. Yeah. But all his friends were girls. And I suppose in many ways to David, it felt like a virus inside him, an incurable virus that he would constantly strive to find a cure for. And Joanne was almost like an enemy as well, an enemy within him that he would never, ever be able to conquer.
Wow.
So all his friends were girls. He didn't like doing the rough and tumble things that other boys did. School days, he was bullied constantly. It didn't help with school changes because of his father's move to different towns because of work. But I think people probably picked on him because they saw him as being somebody that didn't fit the norm, what other people perceived to be normal. They saw him as being weak, perhaps effeminate, and he really, really struggled. And of course, he was still dressing, putting on his mother's clothes, all in secret, of course, because when he got into teenage years, he was actually raiding his mother's drawers and wardrobe in the bedroom and secretly sort of taking things out until one day his father caught him. And I can picture what happened even to this day. He was so severely reprimanded, but he couldn't talk to them. He couldn't talk to them about how he felt, and of course Joanne was feeding him all the time with these thoughts and emotions. So it was very difficult for David at school. He left with virtually no qualifications, left school, eventually went to work on a farm, and by the age of sort of 18, 19, he was buying his own clothes. And he'd buy them under the pretense of buying them for a girlfriend. But of course he'd take them back home to where he lived at the time and just dress up and wish that he'd been born a girl. And he knew then, but he still couldn't accept it. And he used to try and, I suppose, try and conquer Joanne as an enemy by, he had a little incinerator in the garden. He'd put all the clothes that he'd bought in the incinerator and burn them.
Right.
Thinking, right, this is how I can cure what's going on with me. And of course it didn't work, because what happened is Joanne just got stronger and stronger, and all these desires to present as a girl, as a woman, came back. But of course it was all in private. And it eventually drove him to a nervous breakdown.
Right.
The issues that he was facing, this constant life of trying to validate his life as a male, was just driving him mad. And he was referred to a sexual psychologist in the city of Birmingham at the time, and he was basically told to go and read the magazines on the top shelf. Well, that just absolutely blew, that's not what he wanted to hear.
Yeah, absolutely.
And these desires to dress were getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And he had girlfriends, probably, I think if I look back on it, he had girlfriends because he wanted to be like them rather than be with them.
Yeah, right, I see.
And he felt more comfortable around girls than he did around boys or young men. And life went. So the year 2000, his wife died. Could he accept his destiny? No. And it would take another 14 years at the age of 58 before a very dark day when David went and sat on the edge of Beachy Head, which is a local beauty spot on the south coast, and he contemplated taking his life. For David, I suppose it was a chance to think about his life, what it could be like and what it had been like. But he was dragged back from the edge by two very, very compassionate police officers who took him to safety and talked to him. And about a week later, he decided that he could no longer go on. And he essentially lay down on the ground, and it was as if somebody had undone a long zip down his body, and out came Joanne. So Joanne was born in 2014, and I was 58, but it was incredible how the sense of relief, the sense of now I can really be who I wanted to be all my life, who I'd been fighting to be all my life.
Absolutely.
And it was amazing. I changed my name by deed poll. I took my name from my mother, who was called Anne Josephine. Nobody ever called her Anne. They always called her Jo, short for Josephine. So it was natural for me to take Joanne as a legacy, really, from my mother, who never knew the daughter that she now had, although she's obviously looking down on me from heaven, and I hope she's proud of what I've achieved. I started hormone replacement therapy, and I started doing advisory work. I became a community first responder for the ambulance service, and people accepted me for who I was. I became a diversity champion for them as well. But 2 years later, I had to resign because of a life-threatening medical condition, which I still have. And I devoted my time to other things. I had full gender reassignment surgery in 2017. And whilst I was recovering at home, one of my sons, one's in New Zealand now, but the other one still lives locally. He came to visit me at home, essentially, I think, to see how I was, because it's major surgery. And totally out of the blue, he said, "Is it okay if I call you Mum now?"
Oh, I bet your heart melted when you heard that, didn't it?
And I just burst into tears. It was so affirming.
On my arm. That's giving me tingles.
You know,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I always tell people that because I think it brings it home to people exactly what I'd done and how um, my family, my immediate family, then respected me.
Yeah.
I told my father about my transition, who was still alive. I went down to see him. He'd remarried as well, because it's something that I couldn't do over the phone, and I told him,
Mm.
and he said, "You'll always be my son. I will never call you Joanne,
Right.
but I understand."
Well,
I think he
yeah,
knew. I'm pretty sure he knew.
yeah.
Um, and he didn't disown me. He was quite happy for me to stay there. We went out for meals. He sadly passed away 6 years ago.
Yeah.
Um, but you know, life goes on. I'm happy now in what I do. I've achieved so much, and things that I suppose in a way I would never have dreamt of achieving in my life.
Yeah.
And it's been an absolutely incredible journey, and I just have a passion now for supporting not just the transgender community, who obviously I don't want to go through what I went through,
Yeah, absolutely.
but all minority groups, the whole of the LGBTQ plus community, BAME, the disability, everybody that's in a minority group, I will support, and I will try and help raise awareness of the issues faced by them.
Absolutely. I mean, this is the thing. That's what I always say. Discrimination can affect us all. Therefore, it's all of our responsibility to tackle it.
Mm,
And when I talk about allyship as
mm,
well, great to be an LGBTQIA plus ally, but actually, not even just from an intersectional perspective, but we have to be allies of equality, equity, and inclusion, because otherwise we'll never really
mm,
make change within society. Or we'll never really tackle discrimination as a whole. So I really love,
yeah.
that you said that. I mean, and that thank you for sharing your journey there, your lived experience. Even up to that stage, because again, everyone's journey is so different. But yours, what an emotional roller coaster. And I'm sure they could make a film out of
Yeah.
it, Joanne. On a serious note, like,
Well, I've been on television as a community champion with ITV Meridian. I was interviewed by one of the presenters in person, and he was absolutely blown away by my story. And
yeah,
and but this is what I do. I think the thing with me is I have always been so positive, and I've always wanted to share my story, not only because it helps people to understand what I've been through, but it enables them to think about how they view minority groups of people and then become allies themselves. And I can only do that by sharing my story. And a lot of transgender people, and I don't identify as transgender anymore, but a lot of transgender people, all they want to do is just get on with their lives. They don't want to broadcast what they've been through.
mm,
And I understand that. And everybody's journey is totally unique.
mm,
Everybody's journey is
yeah,
different. And, my journey is different to anybody else's, and what I've been through. And a lot of the community receive considerable amounts of hate and discrimination.
yeah,
I suppose in a way I've been lucky, um, partly because of where I live. Brighton is a very cosmopolitan
right,
city,
yeah, absolutely,
but I think partly because I've always been so positive.
yeah. So you're strong as well in your mindset, and not to say that other people who have challenges and difficulties, but
Yeah.
you sound like you're a very resilient person, and obviously going through many challenges. After a while, you become stronger, and it helps you to kind of deal with more that you face as you kind of go along. Even thinking of
Yeah.
your challenges, do you have like a is there a, how do you kind of deal with them in yourself? Do you have like a I don't know, positive mantras, or what is it? Because you've obviously faced a lot.
Well, yeah, I suppose discrimination I haven't. The one thing that did really upset me, I had there was two occasions. The first one was when I tried to support a transgender friend
Mm.
who had been refused access to female
Right.
facilities in a pub, and I received death threats.
Oh my gosh.
And um, I was scared to go out of the
Mm.
house, but the police got involved, and they did find out who was sending the threats, and there was a good outcome, shall we say.
Yeah.
The other time was actually on social media, on Twitter,
Oh, God,
and
Twitter.
Twitter, yeah, yeah. It's always Twitter. We love Twitter, don't we?
Yeah.
Um, but I had some really vitriolic hate comments. I'd been up at the National Diversity Awards in Liverpool
Mm.
for the weekend, and I came back home. Whilst I was up there, there was a Labour Party conference in Brighton and a Women's Place meeting in Brighton where a lot of transgender activists were demonstrating outside.
Mm.
And somebody had obviously picked up on the fact that I did advisory work for Sussex Police and made a comment on Twitter. I actually had a follow request from this person, and I looked. I'm so cautious about who I accept as friends on any social media platform, and I had a look and I saw this post, and basically it was saying that whilst I was swanning it up in Liverpool at the NDA, all this was going on with demonstrations at this Women's Place meeting, and the comments I got on that Twitter platform, on that Twitter post, why is this man talking to girls in schools? If next time I go up to the Bluebell Railway, if I ever see this person, it's
Yeah.
the language was just,
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
and it nearly finished me.
yeah.
But you say about what drives me on, and whilst it did upset me, I thought, you know what, I'm not gonna let anybody drag me down. It's taken me 58 years to get to where I am, and I'm not going to let it go. And I pressed on and I forgot about it.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, it's like, particularly when it's hate speech and it's things like on social media, unfortunately. I mean, a lot of the thing I always say is it's often keyboard warriors, isn't it? It's people who are wanting to, they've got all the mouth, online. Reality
Yeah,
is,
yeah,
and I think to an extent you just have to switch off from that. It doesn't mean, you are human. Of course, it's going to have an impact, but you have to get to the stage where you're like, do you know what? I've got to park that, and and otherwise you wouldn't come out your front door, would you?
no, you wouldn't. No, and you have to, and of course I've achieved so much since then as well as you
Yeah.
very kindly said in the
Well,
introduction.
you have, and with that, I want to touch on winning the or being awarded the OBE. How was that?
That was absolutely amazing because prior to that, in 2020, I'd also won the diversity category for We Are the City's Top 100 Rising Star Awards.
Wow.
I'd also been given a Chief Constable's commendation for service and dedication to Sussex Police as a volunteer advisor. And I got this brown envelope in the post at the beginning of December 2020, and I thought it was from the tax office. I didn't open it
Yeah, we
for
do.
about 4
We
days.
then wonder.
Yeah. Oh, brown envelope, tax office. I'm not going to open
In the
that.
door.
Anyway, I looked at it a bit more, and it was handwritten, and it was really scruffy writing. I'll never forget it. And I thought, oh, perhaps it's not from the tax office. So I opened it, and there it was in the letter inside. We are writing, dear Miss Monck, we're writing to you in the strictest confidence to say that you have been recommended by the Prime Minister to Her Majesty the Queen for an OBE for services to transgender equality as a global LGBT advocate and independent advisor. And I was absolutely blown away. And of course I had to keep it secret as well.
You want to
And
advertise?
it was no, not until it was actually advertised on Twitter by a good friend, before I'd woken up on New Year's Day when it was released, so people actually already knew about it.
So did you know that it was, you had to keep it hidden and secret, and then little did you know it was already kind of out there
well, it was the list is released at 10:30 at night on New Year's Eve.
Right.
And of course I'd gone to bed by then. I never stay up.
You weren't partying, okay.
I had told my son, you're only allowed, you can tell one family member, but they have to be, they're basically sworn to secrecy. But it came out, and of course that has just escalated my profile considerably. I'm an ambassador, as you've already said, for 4 organisations in the UK, and consultant. I'm on the advisory board of the Global Equality Collective, an ambassador for the Dr. Miranda Braun Diversity and Leadership Foundation. I'm an advisor, specialist advisor for Informed Minds, obviously Pride Life, an ambassador, an advocate, and it's very humbling, I think. And I'm actually, I should say this, I'm actually going to a big gala evening on Wednesday at the Grand Hotel in Brighton, because I'm a finalist for another award as well.
Really? Listen, you're going to have to get yourself down to IKEA, get a couple of shelves, aren't you, to put all your awards on.
Well, I've got a lot on. There's a few on the back there. Look, see.
You're going to run out of room soon.
Yeah. So, but no, it's been absolutely incredible.
Yeah, and well, listen, congratulations on the new awards and everything else that you did. But also, you mentioned the Bluebell Railway. That, of course, you're the Equality, Inclusion and Diversity Advisor for them as well, which is part of a heritage railway in Sheffield. What I think is interesting there is that I guess many people who are patrons for that, when we think about people who are on the board, will obviously have you as the advisor for them, but generationally they wouldn't have maybe had the language or the even understanding or knowledge at that point. Especially particularly around people who identify as trans. What has that been like?
Yeah. Well, first off, the Bluebell Railway is at Sheffield Park, not Sheffield. So it's not in Sheffield up north. It's in Sussex. Yeah, we can edit that bit. But yeah, when I first started going there, a lot of the volunteers on these heritage railways are of an older generation. And I used to get misgendered. I used to get all sorts of funny looks. And again, I got round it by talking to them. I say, look, this is me. I'm still a person. I'm still a human being. Does it matter if I've changed my gender? And I'd tell them a little bit about what it was like, and slowly but surely they all came
Yeah.
round, and they asked me to be their sort of equality, diversity and inclusion advisor for the railway, and I did a short film for them as well, which went on their website about EDI. And whenever I go up there now, I'm just so highly respected, not just as a I, not just as an award winner. That's by the
Yeah.
way,
Who you
but
are as an individual.
my positivity as an individual, and I've earned a lot of respect from these older people that volunteer there, and it's changed their
Yeah.
outlook.
I mean, and I know also that you do work in partnership with the police as well, with transgender cases. I mean, what's that like? Again, I expect you may have experienced similar challenges to start with.
Well, yeah, I got asked to join um, the Sussex. They're all advisory panels that I serve on. So the first one that I got asked to serve on was their trans external reference group, and they invited me on it. And over the years that I've been a member of that group, I've been able to help them bust the myths and the stigmas around the transgender community in order to help them engage with that community more proactively.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I'm on a number of other advisory groups as well, and 3 of them are actually centered around hate crime and stop and
Right.
search. The other role that I have that I suppose is linked with the police is I'm an independent custody visitor for the Sussex Police Crime
Yeah.
Commissioner.
Okay.
So I go into, I haven't done obviously during COVID, but I go into custody centres and independently talk to detainees with somebody else to basically check on their
Yeah.
welfare, and how they're being cared for in custody. And I picked up fairly early on that there were no specific rights for transgender people whilst in custody.
Wow.
And I pointed it out to a sergeant. It then went to an inspector, and then it went to the National Police Federation, and they changed the policy for custody of transgender people so that their rights are now protected whilst in custody.
That's so interesting as well, isn't it?
Um,
Because again, there's so much that people take for granted. And
yes,
you
yeah.
wouldn't even think about that. I mean, and I can imagine is also trans people that are being held in custody. That also on the other side of it for them, the relief when they do see someone like you, who is there as an advocate for them.
Mm.
What's that kind of like? What tends to be that reaction?
I've never met a transgender detainee,
Ah,
which I mean, but the chances are, I mean, perhaps I do two or possibly 3 visits a
yeah,
month, but the chances of actually going when there was a transgender detainee would be quite
yeah,
slim, and it's never happened. But having said that, I know that if there are transgender
yeah,
detainees, their rights are being
protected. Yeah,
followed, respected as individuals, and it includes things like their right to be searched by an officer of their
yeah,
choice. There's lots of little things that can help, whether they're on medication whilst they're in custody. HRT, for example, they still have to
Yeah.
have it and make sure that they've got access to that as well. So
Yeah. I mean,
it is
oh
important.
gosh, absolutely. Yeah, but that's what I mean. It's quite fascinating in many ways that like I say, things that many people would just completely be oblivious to and take for granted. So it's great that you're able to be in a position where you can advise. And actually, probably in many ways, it's great that there aren't any or many trans detainees that are there. So I mean that's good, but great that people could be reassured that at least you've put, or even for yourself, at least you've put that in place.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
gonna
yeah,
make
yeah.
a massive difference.
So yeah, I mean it is important, and that's obviously the work that I do with Sussex Police is why I got the commendation from the Chief Constable, which is extremely rare for somebody that doesn't actually work
Yeah.
or volunteer, like a special constable or something, but doesn't work for Sussex Police. I'm just somebody that goes along to a meeting and says, look here, you can't do that, you can't do this, you can say that, you can say
Yeah.
this. Why are these figures on hate crime high? Why aren't we getting the prosecutions through on transgender hate crime? All this sort of thing, because I'm also an advisor for the Crown Prosecution Service as well.
Right.
So
Okay. Is this something that I mean, it would be great. Hopefully, I'm sure you're working on this as well. But you're obviously working with Sussex Police right now for trans kind of rights across the board in other counties with the police. Is this something that is being shared, but as best practice, or is that something maybe being worked?
no, I think most police forces, from what I've seen, are very, very
Right.
inclusive. They have to be. They have to be seen to be, as are the other emergency services, the fire brigade, the ambulance, the coast guard. They have to be seen to be inclusive. And let's face it, when for example, the police are dealing with a community that can have many, many different minority groups within it, they like to be represented themselves by those minority groups. So they're looking to, I know transgender police officers, I know black police officers, I know police officers of different ethnicity and race, but it's all a way of showing that they are
Yeah.
inclusive,
Yeah.
and gender as well, because I fight for gender equality. And you look at the number of female chief constables now. Sussex Police has a lovely female chief constable. East Sussex Fire and Rescue Service has a female chief fire
Yeah.
officer. So gender equality is equally as important as equality of all minority groups of people.
Absolutely. Oh well, this is what we kind of touched on at the beginning, wasn't it? How we have to be allies of equality, equity, and inclusion. Everyone, deserves that space. So it's about tackling discrimination for everybody. I feel well in order
Yeah,
to create that social justice, to create that inclusive space, work, schools, and the wider society, isn't it?
yeah,
We know that obviously in the news recently, there's been a lot of spotlight on the trans community over the past months. Unfortunately, not
yes, yes,
positive. And of course, it just highlights that whilst there are positive things there, but unfortunately, at the moment, it's not been great for the trans community, particularly with the recent headlines around the new ruling announced, which means that transgender women will not be allowed to take part in elite swimming competitions, or obviously with the International Rugby League. I mean, what are your thoughts on this ruling? Because again, it's just feels like you keep getting thrown back, isn't it?
yeah. First off, I think the transgender community gets slated
Absolutely, of course. I do.
always get slated. But one point I must make is you never hear about transgender men. It is always transgender women.
Yeah.
Now, I like to be really almost middle of the road, because I do understand both sides of the argument. And if we're looking at, we had the case of the transgender college swimmer in the United States recently that kept winning the female races. But there is an argument perhaps to have, I suppose, an inclusive category where anybody can enter. But I think if a transgender woman hasn't had surgery, then they should be going into a different mixed event. And the reason I say that is because of the testosterone levels. We know that testosterone levels in a man are significantly higher. They are what forms or helps to form muscle strength, in particular. And so you have to look at both sides of the argument, and I do understand both sides of the argument as well. I wouldn't like to, not that I can swim anyway, but I've had surgery. My muscle mass is probably at least 30% less than it was before I transitioned. And my testosterone levels are nil. But you have to throw into this the discussion as to why transgender men are never talked about in sport. A transgender man will be taking testosterone. Now, the International Olympics Committee and all these different sports committees have certain set levels of the amount of testosterone that can be had in your body. And if it exceeds that amount, you're not allowed to compete, which is fair enough. But if a transgender man is taking testosterone, where do they compete? Do they compete in men's events alongside men that are naturally full of testosterone, naturally have this upper body strength? Or do they compete with women and again have an unfair advantage because they're on testosterone therapy, which will increase their muscle mass? And you can argue, I suppose, for hours that I suppose the difference between the two and where you sit. So for me, it's understanding both sides of the argument, and I do understand both sides of the argument, and I never like to say, well, no, this is completely wrong. You shouldn't be doing that. The one thing that I am annoyed about is the government's ban on conversion therapy for LGB and not T. That is absolutely disgraceful.
You're not
Absolutely
obviously in
disgraceful.
that at all. And I think shocking is a word that will come to mind as well, because as we know, it was set to go ahead and then again just kind of stripped away with that.
Yeah.
You talked about we've got maybe mixed categories, mixed gender categories. Do you think that's something we might see in the future then with sports federations? Do you think that may be the way things might be heading?
I think it might be a good outcome for people going through this. I think it might happen. There's no reason why it can't. Exactly what proportion of mixed genders you'll get in these events, I don't know. You might find elite male swimmers going into mixed events because they think they might have a better chance of
Yeah.
winning.
Yeah.
It would have to be very carefully governed, I think, as to, you know, maybe it should be a mixed event for transgender men and transgender women. I mean, that would.
I guess it's something that the future holds, isn't it? See what happens.
Well, we don't know. It's just a case of watch this space. But you know, as always, I think the transgender community are going to get slated for anything. So it just seems to be the only you never hear about LGB in the newspapers. It's always transgender, and it's always transgender women.
We had
and
just to touch on that, we had Eva Echo on for our second guest. We had Eva on last time. She touched on that as well, just to say, you know, talking a lot around misogyny, and how, you know, as a result, you know, trans men are not typically seen as a threat in society, as opposed to, you know, trans women, and how people assume that they are going to impact on women's rights, etc. But actually, you know, just wanting to be part of society, part of the community, and part of, you know, as human beings, deserving that level of respect as well. So, you know.
Yeah. It's like using female facilities. There's long been debates as to whether transgender women should be allowed to use female facilities, but there's never a debate as to whether transgender men should be able to use male facilities. You know, it's always very difficult. I didn't use female facilities until I'd actually had my surgery. I always used to use gender neutral or disabled facilities because I didn't want biological females to feel threatened by my presence.
Do you feel, it's interesting you say that, do you feel that maybe that might have been something where you, because you said earlier, you know, you hid a lot of who you hid yourself, you hid your life or how you really felt, and, you know, around your gender identity for so many years. Was that part of an internal, almost, we talk about internal homophobia, was that almost part of an internal transphobia for yourself, or just feeling like, you know, I can't?
No. I think it was, for me, it wasn't that I wasn't positive about the way I looked or the way I presented. I just didn't want biological female to be threatened in spaces that were specifically allocated to them. Now, of course, it doesn't, to me, it's, you know, it's female facilities and that's it. And nobody bats an eyelid. But then I've changed with the hormone therapy. I have changed so much in facial features, in body structure anyway. So
I see. So again, how you physically present now compared to maybe back then when you had that thought. You thought, actually, I don't want to put myself in that situation, but I also, okay, I'm still, in your mind, you're saying you still felt you were
yeah. You know, there's little things like I've never worn a wig. I just started to grow my hair. So initially it was very short, and I'd had very male facial features. But over the years, obviously my hair's grown, and my face has changed as well. So it's confidence as well in how you look and how you present. And I never, the other thing I never did was go out as a transgender woman and buy a mini skirt, 6-inch stiletto heels, and a ridiculous short top and a long wig and crazy makeup. That was not me. I used to look at what women wore that were a similar age as me.
So you, obviously, for you, you're thinking about what you ultimately, you know, how you feel comfortable, not maybe trying to conform to some kind of outdated stereotype to some people. See how people dress is down to them, and that. But in your mind, you're saying at that point you're thinking, like, okay, well, it's not about conforming, but I want to feel like I'm, in your way, doing it right for you. I guess.
Yes, yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Yes, yes,
Do you
yes.
feel that, we're talking a bit more about obviously the political side and what we're seeing in the media happening with the trans community? What are your thoughts around trans youth and the future of trans youth in terms of their rights and how that may be impacting on them within the next, say, what, 5, 10 years? Where do you kind of see that heading?
Well, I think that with trans youth, first off, it is all about
Mm.
education. I mean, this wasn't actually a trans person, but I did a talk recently at a local grammar school, and after the talk, one of the pupils stood up and said, "My name's AJ. I used to be Alf.
Right. Right.
My pronouns are they, theirs, them," and they were 13 years old.
Wow.
And it was the first time that the whole of that year group had been together in person for my talk. And I was so blown away by what they
Mm.
said. I just went,
Yeah. Yeah.
and every single pupil in that year group stood up and applauded
Oh,
them.
wow.
And it was actually overwhelming, and I think that's one of the highlights of the talks that I've done
Yeah.
to schools, and I've spoken to thousands of pupils over the years. But it is all about encouraging them to be who they want to
Mm.
be.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But it's allowing them, I think the future for transgender youth is allowing them to be who they want to
Mm.
be, giving them the support and not taking away that support. I know they can't have surgery until they're 18, but that's UK
Mm.
law. But access to hormones, access to um, youth gender clinics is so important because they
Mm.
know. I knew when I was 5, but I didn't.
Yeah, you can say.
Those sort of facilities weren't there for
Yeah,
me,
absolutely.
but they are now, and with the support of parents, and I see a lot of cases where parents are very supportive of trans youth, trans children, and that is so good to see.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this is the thing, isn't it? It is about education and awareness, and like you're saying, creating those safe spaces for
Mm,
young people and
yeah,
adults. For people who are maybe a bit more vulnerable or questioning their sexuality or gender identity, to know that actually it's okay for you to be you.
mm,
And I think the more we can encourage that,
yeah,
because as we know, waiting for people who are waiting at gender identity clinics for appointments can be anywhere. Youth can be anywhere up to 3 years.
oh
Well,
crikey,
going up to
yes,
5 years.
yes,
I mean, it's
yes,
just crazy in itself. So support someone can
mm,
get along that way, whilst they're transitioning, even socially, medically, legally, however that may be. It's going to be measurable,
mm,
isn't it, on
mm,
their self-esteem confidence? And clearly, that
mm.
person that felt empowered to stand up and say, "This is who I am," thanks to your talk.
Yes, yeah, and that was an incredible moment. It really was, and I'll never forget it.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, and I think, I just want to quickly, before we kind of round up, touch on, some of those kind of, moments, those magic moments in your career, because by no means are you finished. There's so much more you're still doing, but you have, there's so
Mm.
much you've achieved already. Um, are there any other of those, favourite moments that you hold particularly close to your heart? And I'm sure there's many.
Oh, crikey. I suppose I wouldn't really know where to start. There's been lots of incredible
Mm.
moments. Obviously, winning the awards have been incredible moments in my sort of career to promoting awareness of
Mm.
diversity. Um, some of the talk, some of the the applaud and the reception that I've had from students in schools that I've
Yeah.
given. Um, has been absolutely incredible at the end of my talks. They all stand up, and people coming up to me afterwards and asking me really personal questions, and um, it in a way it shows the impact. I think one of the things that I will never forget is the comment that Matt Teal from ITV made after he interviewed me. Because he had tears in his eyes when he was talking to me. And when he said at the end, "Joanne, thank you so much. That was absolutely incredible. Thank you for sharing
Yeah,
your story." And obviously the big one is my son when he said, "Can I call you
yeah.
mummy?"
I mean, listen, you can get the awards, the accolade, the titles, but when it comes to your children or your family members, considering your journey,
That's
yeah, then I can
Yeah,
absolutely
that
imagine.
that is what's important for me. Yes, the awards have significantly raised my
Yeah,
profile, but you know what? What's most important to me is the respect that I get from my
absolutely.
family
Yeah,
and my
yeah.
friends and the people that I help and
Mm.
work for.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah.
that's that's what's
Absolutely,
important.
because ultimately, like you say, it's from the root. You're going back to how your own analogy about your journey as of the tree and the roots, but from the roots and your children and your family, they're the people that matter and the positive people in your
Mm,
life that matter. So
yeah.
yeah,
But that's it. You see, you mentioned the tree again. The way I reflect on that part of my life was that David had to die in order to let me
yeah,
live. And that imaginary tree was cut down when David had acceptance of his
mm,
destiny. But it was only cut down to ground level. So Joanne's roots were still there, and she grew her own
you
tree.
grew your own tree, you blossomed.
Yeah,
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 absolutely did.
yeah,
And,
yeah.
I just want to say, listen, Joanne, thank you so much for your time. It's been just an amazing story listening to, to your journey. And I've just loved every moment of it. And I love
Yeah, thank
everything
you.
that you do, the work that you're doing, and long may it continue because you're fabulous. So thank
Oh,
you.
you're lovely. No, you're fabulous
Oh,
too.
well,
So
I'll take that from Joanne Monck OBE. Yeah, okay, I'll take. But thank you for that, John. I really appreciate that. And just for everyone, again, listening before we do round up, I want to say thank you for listening to the Pride Life Presents again. You can listen to us online. We are going to be across various different platforms. Make sure you get yourself a copy of Pride Life magazine or check us out online as well. But thank you, and we look forward to seeing you at our next Pride Life Presents. Joanne Monck OBE. Mwah! You've been amazing. Thank you for your time and goodbye.
thank you. Thanks, Saski.